Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value-creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a SOCA researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy.
Greetings, I'm Casey Lartigue. I'm an American living and working in Seoul, Korea. I'm co-founder of Freedom Speakers International, and I'm so happy to be on your podcast.
Hi, Casey. Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm very excited to have you on the podcast as well. And I recall us connecting not too long ago, a couple weeks at a Harvard mixer, and it was such a joy to be able to meet up with a fellow educator, fellow American as well. And I was just curious, right? What brought you to Seoul, and what was the work that you were doing right now? And I was just blown away by your passion of serving an incredible community who are, I think really they have these powerful stories, and that I'm very drawn to individuals who also really want to share out stories, and especially when it involves, groups like North Korean refugees that have experienced so much hardship. I think, you bringing that to light and sharing it with others is so important. And I know that you've done so much before, getting to this stage, that probably helped you in many, many ways to be able to do the impactful work that you're doing. And so I was like, I need to get this guy on my podcast and learn more about why he does what he does. So I'm just happy that you're here, and wanted to ask you if you can share some of the important milestones of your journey as an educator, and what got you to want to found the organization that you're currently leading, and the group that you support and empower. So I'd love to hear more about your story.
Okay, sure. So after I graduated from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where you also graduated from, I went to Taipei, Taiwan to teach English. I had a choice between an internship or just go and see the world. And I want to go and see the world. So first I went to Taipei, Taiwan, and then I came to Seoul, Korea, teaching English also. Again, just something to do as a young man. And then I went back to the USA and I started working at the Cato Institute. And first of all, a staff writer, and then later on as education policy analyst. Now, the first time I was in South Korea, I met different people, and they were with the Center for Free Enterprise, and they went to Washington, D.C. on a trip, and I met them again. I was like, hey, I know you guys. And then we started talking, and then the point was that, I think I can go back to South Korea, but this time not as an English teacher, but, in some other capacity, and they invited me back as a visiting fellow. Now, during that time, I met North Korean refugees, and I just felt so humble because I had been focused on freedom. I've been working at the Cato Institute at the Center for Educational Freedom. And here I was meeting people who had to risk their lives to get the freedom. And so I kind of felt like I was before like a guy at a cocktail party, toasting to freedom. Okay. But at first I didn't really know what to do. So I did everything. I helped to send air balloons to North Korea. And I was not the main person. I was just joining others who were organizing those trips to send air balloons to North Korea, helping to send CDs and DVDs. And probably the crazy story is the American who wanted to send comic books to North Korea. Okay, whatever. So, but we did it. And I was involved in so many different ways. Suddenly I was everywhere. This was 2012. I was involved in many things. And then I had dinner one night with the first North Korean refugee that I had met. And she was just praising me. You went from not knowing anything about North Korea and now you're everywhere. Wow. And I'm just soaking it up like, oh, thanks so much. And then she said, but, and I'm like, but what? Do you really want to hear? Yes, I do. And then she says, but what you're doing doesn't help those of us who've already escaped. And I was like, oh, so what is it that you need? English, and also the ability to tell our stories in English. So, okay, around that time, I met a South Korean researcher named Eun-gu Lee, and we put our two heads together and realized that we could have an impact on North Korean refugees by helping them with English. Now, this was just a hobby. Again, I was working at the Center for Free Enterprise as the director for international relations, but after a couple of sessions, we just realized that this is something that's really valuable. We had many North Korean refugees coming to us, chasing us. So then we decided to continue. And then later on, we had a North Korean refugee named Yumbi Park who came through the program, and she attracted so much attention. But then after she went to the USA, we had people asking us, "Do you have any more North Korean refugees who can give speeches and conduct interviews?" So we decided to add the public speaking to what we were doing with helping them with English. And then I went on a trip to India and I saw the response of the audience and I came back and I told my co-founder, we can do more with this project than what we're doing now. So then we decided to make it an official organization. And we've now had about 700 North Korean refugees study English, public speaking, and career development. We've had 23 English speech contests featuring North Korean refugees. We've now published 5 books, including 4 by North Korean refugees. And I'm actually co-author of one of the books, Greenlight the Freedom, with a North Korean refugee named Songmi Han. So we've won awards and we've gotten all kinds of attention now. So it started off with nothing and just 2 people coming together. And now we've built this incredible organization.
Mm. Wow. Well, congratulations. I mean, it just sounds like this culmination of all of your past experiences coming into this very clear purpose that you have of supporting North Korean refugees with, like you said, right, English, and then the ability to tell their stories in
Mm,
English so that more of the world really comes to understand, appreciate, and feel, like they can perhaps like contribute, right,
mm,
to this larger struggle, right, beyond just probably the borders of North Korea, and but like also in terms of like freedom felt everywhere.
mm,
And I think that it's so amazing that you kind
mm,
of found yourself going from like one place to the next, right? You said Taipei, and then you were in Korea, came back to the US, and then to have this kind of like happenstance, like, oh, I you met someone in Korea, and then now you were having this like kind of connection again, and it kind of like sparked this new multiple chapter period of your life, it seems like, right, because it's still
mm,
ongoing. And yeah, and I just think it's so cool that you're able to leverage teaching English and
mm,
working at an institute that champion educational freedom. And
mhm,
and so yeah, I'm curious though, because I think there's a couple components that really like sparked my interest. One was this desire to want to be abroad, right? Like you said,
mm,
after finishing your graduate studies, and you just decided Taipei, Taiwan, like let's
mhm,
go. So I'm curious about that chapter of your life, and then I'm also curious about it seems like you had quite a bit of experience working at the Cato Institute, and so I'm also curious to understand like what attracted you to that particular institute. So
mm.
could you share a little bit more details about those
Yeah.
2 moments? Because I think
Well,
that really, those are foundational for what you're doing right now.
mm. Okay, well, I can tell you the moment when I decided to travel abroad. So I was at the Graduate School of Education, and one day in class, a class that I was auditing, the professor asked one of the students from Japan, let's just say Keiko. Okay, Keiko, what is it like in your country with this policy? And then she gave her response. And then I raised my hand and I said, somebody in your country disagrees with you. What do they say about this? Because I'm always interested in the other side. I don't want to just hear one side of an issue. I like to hear both sides. And then she said she didn't know. And I thought that was, how can you not know what the other side is saying? And I said, you know what? I'm going to go to your country and I'm going to find out what the people who disagree with you, what they have to say. So I didn't go to Japan. I ended up going to Taipei, Taiwan instead. But I remember that moment that I decided I wanted to travel abroad. Before then, seriously, I had never thought about it. And especially South Korea, I had never thought about it. But ended up going to Taiwan first and then to South Korea after that. Now I had a great time, just teaching English, and I was a young man, so just hanging out at that time, as opposed to now I'm just at the office all the time. So that was kind of the motivation about traveling abroad, and that is being exposed to different ideas, meeting different people, and finding out who's that person who disagrees with that student. About the Cato Institute, so I was in South Korea, and I was applying for different places, and I received job offers from Reason Magazine, uh, I think the Bergen Record in New Jersey, because I was a sports reporter on the Harvard Crimson, and they offered me a position as a sports reporter, and then the Cato Institute. And I decided on the Cato Institute, for various reasons. But one is that I was interested about educational freedom, that their executive vice president David Bowles was writing about it very often, but they didn't have a center at that time. But I wrote to them and I explained who I am and that I'm interested in working with them. And then they sent me back a response. Yes, we're very interested in you, but we have to meet you. And I'm like, I am in South Korea now. And they said, okay. And they said, but we have to meet you before we can hire you. So I flew from South Korea to Washington, D.C. And before the interview was over, they said, we want to hire you. So then I went back to South Korea and just moved all my stuff, and then started working at the Cato Institute. And I worked there for about 6 years. And it was an interesting time there. I testified before the U.S. Congress. I was an educational consultant to one governor and also to two politicians, two congressmen. And also just around the country, I had lots of parents contacting me, asking me to come into their area and to help them because they wanted more educational choices for their children. So it's a really, really interesting time. But as I said, when I had the chance to come back to South Korea, I took it and came back here.
Wow. Well, I mean, it sounds like a whirlwind of experiences, not just in terms of the places that you lived in, but also I think this search for finding different opinions, understanding different realities, right? Asking interesting questions. And I think, it sounds like no coincidence, right? For someone who would respond in such a way to this like Japanese student where it's like, well, how do you not know the other side? It does kind of seem to be very fitting that you would want to work in a space where, especially within like the realm of education and like, I would imagine the kind of intersections with politics of like, you have to know so many different sides. I mean, it's probably 360 degrees, like, perspectives and, different conflicting interests, but learning how to navigate that, I'm sure for yourself felt very exciting
Well, you know
and
what? I'll mention
presented new
something.
challenges.
Right. I'll mention something. So when I was at Harvard Graduate School of Education, my advisor was Nathan Glazer. And I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was kind of a big deal back in the 1960s and 1970s. Um, so he, okay, no matter what I said, no matter which book I mentioned, he had read it. And he was not interested in winning a debate. He was interested in understanding and knowing. And I was really attracted to that. The idea, about winning debates. I hate debates. I like discussion, not debates, because debate, you're trying to win the argument. You're trying to find the weak point that the other person makes. But when it's a discussion, you give your viewpoint and the other person gives his or her viewpoint, and there's nothing about who won and who lost, but what did you learn, what did you gain from the interaction. So that's attracted me for quite a while. That's also why I was really interested in Robert Nozick. He was a philosophy professor at Harvard, and he publicly changed his mind. So in the 1970s, he wrote a book about libertarianism, and then later on, he changed his views. Nathan Glazer, in 1975, he wrote a book, Affirmative Discrimination, writing against affirmative action. By 1987, he had started to change his view. And by the time that I met him, he had just renounced his previous beliefs. So actually, I'm interested in people who change their views, who believe in one thing at one point and then completely switch to a different view, because it means you're always looking, you're always thinking, you're not trapped by your beliefs at a certain age. In my case, I started off as a young Republican when I was in high school. Then I went to Harvard and I became a Democrat. And then I became a liberal. And then for a while, I was flirting with Marxism. And then I flipped completely, became an objectivist and then a libertarian. And now I just say that I'm an extremist and I'm extremely proud of it. So I don't have a particular, view that I hold on to. Just I embrace them all. They've all, helped me develop my thinking. So I don't hold on to a particular belief. Definitely, I'm not for a particular party. I'm not really interested in politics in terms of who wins and who loses, but just more about what is the idea? What is it that you're trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish?
Wow. That's fascinating. I really I like what you said about from these professors that you had at the Harvard Ed School. They really resonated with you. They struck a certain chord, right? Of like wanting to know, wanting to
Hmm.
understand, and then also I think part of it, in a sense, I think is like the conviction of like pursuing that, and then having the courage to put it out there, even if it
Hmm.
maybe right contradicts something in the past that you held to. Because I would imagine, especially for the public statements that they had about changing their mind, it didn't happen, every other day, right? And not like that
Hmm.
flip flopping, but really
Hmm.
came from this longer search, and this careful understanding of, well, not just from the books that I'm reading, but the conversations that I'm having, maybe the places that I'm going to, all of these
Hmm.
things kind of converging in a very definitive, oh, this is it. This is who I am right now. And I think also speaks to this evolution of not only thought, but also their own sense of being and maybe identity, right? That can be, seen as more malleable rather than just set in stone. And that's actually very freeing as well, right? Rather
Hmm.
than thinking you just have to stay in like a small box, and then just operate from that for the rest of your life.
Hmm.
And I like also, this what you mentioned about like kind of less interested in debate and more in the discussions point, because again, that provides a forum for you to really think through different ideas and learn and be challenged on your own viewpoints, and then be able to kind of put out yours. And I'm curious, like, do you see that discussion and then the word dialogue as something similar meaning? Or because like when you were talking about discussion, I was thinking of it in terms of like a dialogue where maybe with another person there is that similar exchange, but I'm curious if like you've thought about that meaning,
Yeah,
in
I
a
think
different
dialogue is
way.
very similar to discussion. So maybe, if we check ChatGPT, we can find out what the exact difference is between the two. But actually, dialogue, I think, is another appropriate word.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
I think of it in terms of dialogue, at least I think discussion is also very, very important. I mean,
Mhm.
any kind of exchange, especially in the times that we're living in, where again, there's this kind of feeling of, if you say something, it might threaten my belief, and then you just want to end the conversation as soon as possible because it gets
Mm.
uncomfortable. But the willingness to continue to go into like uncharted territory, or to at least hear them out, and then have that certain openness of your own kind of like, oh, where am I? Where,
Mhm.
how is this landing with me right now? It definitely feels like it needs, this process needs to happen more and more. So you kind of received that training for yourself during those 6 years that you were at the Cato Institute, or even before that, right? And
Mm.
when you were at the ed school, would you say that like those lessons transferred into the kind of work that you were doing, especially with North Korean refugees, or
Yeah.
even with like other stakeholders that you were interacting with around the world, not only in South Korea?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think that was in me from a young age. So I've there's this term defenselessness, and that is I have nothing to defend. I'm just learning. And I think even before I ever heard that term, I had already embraced it. Another thing that I embraced from a young age is the idea of embrace criticism. So I'm not afraid of any criticism of anything that I do. I'm more likely to learn something from what the critic says, because critics will point out minor, details about you that they think are wrong. Your friends are more likely to just let it go. They don't want to start an argument with you. So I think it's important to pay attention to what critics have to say. Actually, our organization, so we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have a speech contest based on North Korean refugees wanting to tell their stories. Well, when I first started this work, there were some crazy people on the internet accusing me of brainwashing North Korean refugees, trying to tell them what to say. And I'm like, you really don't know me. I want to hear what they have to say. So I have no, that says more about you, that if you had the chance to work with them, that you would try to brainwash them. But that's not what I'm trying to do. But I listened to the criticism. I did not really engage with the critics. I just read what they had to say. And when I read what they were saying, I was like, what would North Korean refugees say if they had the chance? Why don't we set up a project based on North Korean refugees telling their stories? I don't think the critics ever thought that we would create a speech contest that we've now done 23 times, that North Korean refugees are very eager to join, to speak in their own words. But oh yeah, I listen to criticism. I listen to the negative things that people will have to say. I mean, because I'm not like some major public figure, but I'm known among lots of people in South Korea. And once you're known, then everybody got an opinion about you. I mean, some people are accusing me of being with the CIA, which would probably greatly disappoint the CIA if they heard that my work was being compared to their level of, alleged expertise. So yeah, I'm always open to dialogue, discussion. I'm even open to debate, but it seems a little bit pointless to me with the approach that it takes. But I'm open to criticism. I'm open to whatever it is people have to say, because I'm always ready to learn. And you can learn from a friend, you can learn from a critic. But as I said, you can actually learn from critics faster than you can learn from your friends.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
mean, what an incredible mindset to have. And I think that really speaks to like not wasting any opportunity uh, to
Mhm.
to learn from the people around you, and especially from those that have those strong opinions that are citing different critiques. And sometimes the critique, it goes beyond just a critique, and it's just they're just being hateful, right? It seems like now more and more we understand that the process of learning entails a lot of mistakes, and it entails a less than kind of like, ideal situation where everyone's telling you that's a good thing or this is going well. But, you need that kind of friction to then
Mhm.
take note of that and then learn from it. So it just seems that like, maybe it came to you quite naturally, but is there any specific influences when you were younger that helped you get to that point? Or if not, from, interacting with so many people and going through this process and being more self-aware, do you have any advice for how we can be
Yeah.
more
Well,
of that kind of mindset?
yeah, no, I think I've always felt like if something is wrong, then I don't need to defend it. So if it's something that I believe and I come across new evidence or some reason that I should change my mind, well, I am not loyal to an idea. I will abandon it quickly. So as I said, I've gone across all types of different political ideologies. And when I embraced those ideologies, I mean, at the time, for example, when became a libertarian, some libertarians were accusing me of not being a libertarian because they're like, you're attacking us all the time. And I said, you know what? If your idea is not strong enough for me to attack it, then it's not worthy. Okay. If you have an idea, you should never be afraid to have someone examine it. Because again, you can learn something from that kind of experience. So I think I don't know if I was born with it, but I think from a young age, I just felt like, why am I defending some idea that is wrong. I should always be open to new ideas, always open to new perspectives. So I think that's why, again, I'm not sure if this is like global citizen type of thing, but for me, the idea of people around the world are not strangers to me. It's like that old saying that a stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet. So when I think about people from around the world, I feel like I'm at one with them. So that I'm a human and you're human. So what's the problem? I don't see why there are like, lines or walls between us. Mhm,
I think
mhm,
there is a strong connection to global citizenship and what you're speaking about, because it's true that I think as we get older, right, kind of we put up these different walls, and
mhm,
perhaps some of those walls are ideologies, right, political beliefs, and different ideas, right, values that we really adhere to, and and then anything that kind of comes across the challenges that feels threatening,
mhm,
when in reality it's probably like this opportunity to either reaffirm why those are there in the first place, right, in a deeper sense, or to have a sense of like, wow, thank you for helping me to perhaps grow in a way
mm,
that I wouldn't have been able to do had I not met you. And and I think, the packaging of it can be very helpful, because sometimes, again, it could be like a debate where they're just really trying to dig into you and tell you you're wrong and you're a terrible person. But I think with discussions or dialogues, there's very much an, not easier, but it's a route that I think really just, again, respects the person where they're at and allows
mm,
them on their terms to undergo that process of learning. But for you, it sounds like, you're just so willing to like lean into any and all kind of challenge to a belief that, yeah, I think you're able to accelerate it quicker,
mm,
right, than
mm,
probably another person who has maybe some feeling of like, I don't know where this is at. But I think, extending that to any person that you would come across as, again, someone that can really be of great value regardless of what exactly they're saying, I think is such a important mindset to have, especially when you're encountering someone from a very, very different cultural background who has maybe a
mhm,
radically different belief. And it's like, this kind of like bursting your bubble kind of
mm.
moment.
Mhm. Well, have you read any Stoicism, the philosophy
I
of
have
Stoicism?
like Marcus Aurelius, right?
Yes, exactly.
Meditations.
So, but
Yeah.
one thing that the Stoics said is that criticism is like a favor that someone does for you, whereas in our modern times, criticism is seen as an attack on you. So that's something that I've embraced even before I read any of the Stoics points that that criticism is like a favor. So why should I fear something that someone has to say? Friend or enemy, either one is okay. And then, somewhat related, I'm not sure how related this is, but I want to give an example. Years ago, a friend of mine said she wanted to attend the Harvard Graduate School of Education. So I opened up my laptop computer and then she said, but not now. So I closed my laptop computer. Then she says, oh, but I would like to apply. So I opened my laptop computer. And my point is that what is it that you're trying to do? And what is it that you need to do to reach that? So many people just talk. And I want to get to the action. So if you're trying to achieve something, you can recruit me to your team to try to help you achieve it. But I'm not like passing judgment, as long as you're not trying to do anything criminal, of course. But if you're just trying to reach a goal in your life, then what is it that you need to do to achieve that? And then you should have people around you who will, hopefully they'll try to help you achieve that. But also, you shouldn't be afraid of the people who say you can't make it, you can't go there. You know what? So listen to what they say because sometimes they're right. Okay. Sometimes they're like, yeah, you know what? School's not worth it. You're going to have a lot of debt after you graduate and, you might not be able to get a good job after. So you should be open to all types of views, pro, con, negative. Like I said, even the negative people, they don't bother me. Just go ahead and just talk. What is it you have to say? Just go ahead.
Yeah. No, and I think too, though, that like we Yeah, because there's one thing to just, like you said, talk
Mm-hmm.
and think,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this would be nice. Should I go to graduate school? Should I not?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then it's very different from the actual action,
Mm-hmm.
because when you see that someone's taken action on it, that follow through is so important. It's concrete in a way that just talking, it's like ephemeral. It'll just kind of evaporate, and you can change it right from one moment to the next. And I think when taking actions, people who have conviction in what they want to do are able to then follow that action up with another action and then another action. And that's
Mm-hmm.
actually how you advance in life towards whatever the goal is that you want to be doing. And I mean, maybe you can speak to this, especially when starting your organization. When you take one action after another, and it's starting to get bigger, and you're having more people around you, right, to support. You're also attracting that kind of attention that, again, some people would say is unwanted, but from what you're articulating, actually, it just all of it is fuel for you to
Right.
just get closer to your goal. But like, again, it's sometimes again, like the framing of it, it's they're putting it there, like these criticisms, as a way to like tear you down or to distract you. But again, like maintaining that conviction of, I'm going to take this action after the another one. Is it something where like you have to kind of get into tunnel vision of just like continuing to go down that way? You said that you still kind of listen to all of the stuff that's happening around you. It just sounds like a balancing act, but doesn't it get overwhelming at times?
You know what? Actually, my life changed because of a critic. So I was in South Korea first time around, and I was writing in the Korea Times, and a columnist wrote a 2-part editorial criticizing me. And he accused me of being a young African American, trying to be a hired gun for think tanks. And we met and we talked and we actually debated. And then I stopped debating him at one point and I said, which think tanks are you talking about? And he said, oh, like the Cato Institute and Heritage Foundation and others. And I said, I looked up the Cato Institute, I applied, and I ended up getting hired. So critics sometimes can see something in you. Sometimes they can see some potential, and that is threatening to their beliefs. So yeah, my life changed because of a critic. And I mean, actually, my greatest professional achievements came after hearing from critics. So that's why I say I embrace it. And there's no reason to fear it. And again, they're just talking words. They're not taking any action against you. They're just, there's more words out there. So it's okay. Now, actually, I've been influenced about this by several people who've said wonderful things about the difference between talk and action. There's a radio talk show host who actually I used to, actually had a very bad relationship with him, but he would say, after people would call in and say, this is good, this is not good, blah, 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 he would ask them a very simple question. What are you going to do about it? You called me, but that's not enough. What are you going to do about it? One of my mentors is a man named Howard Fuller, and he was quoting somebody else, but he would say that Mr. Talk ain't nothing, Mr. Do is the man. Okay. So yeah, so I've embraced that what's the action? What are you trying to get to? What's your goal? And then what do you need to reach your goal? And can I help you reach your goal in some way? Mhm.
And I think that mentality of taking action, even
Mhm.
amidst adversity, actually, especially when adversity is coming up
Right.
and knocking on your door and breaking it down,
Mhm.
you really need to take that as like a sign that you're probably on the right path. And whether that path kind of branches off into another direction or not, unforeseeable things like discovering the Cato Institute from your biggest
Mhm.
critic can really help you grow in a way. And then now, in hindsight, you're able to look back and actually say, wow, I really need to thank that guy, that really angry
Exactly.
guy, that wrote the thing, because he was a
Well, you know
great
what?
force for you to do even more good in the world.
Right. Well, there's that old saying that a dog doesn't bark at a parked car. All right. So if you're on the move, then somebody's going to be barking at you. Somebody's going to be complaining at you. So just take it as part of taking action, that someone's not going to like what you say or what you do. But it's okay. There are like 8 billion people in the world, and many of them will never hear about you. And then some of them who hear about you won't like you, but it's okay.
Well, I mean, that's a great metaphor. I have the image of a dog right now barking. Would you say though that like in the times that we're living in, there does seem to be this, I don't know, like the world is getting more complex and messier, and it's evident, the interconnectedness of it. And yet it seems like more and more people are like the parked car, rather than an actual moving car. And
Yeah.
and so, yeah, does that must cause some sense of concern on your part. Would you say that's kind of the reality? And it's how is it that we can get people motivated and inspired to pursue those goals and take those actions and be that moving car that a dog is barking at?
Uh-huh. You know what? I don't think we can get around it. I mean, we have this thing called the internet, and we have social media, and people can bark all day, and they can even make money off of their barking. So it's just the reality of life. Now, in my case, okay. People see me posting on social media, but I don't pay attention. I go online, I post about my work, I show photos of our work, and then I get back to work. So I'm not focused on social media. I know lots of people are saying lots of negative things, but these days I'm just doing my work. So actually, I don't really have time. Now, if I get tagged and somebody's criticizing me, then I'll take a look at it, see what it is they have to say. But I think it's too late. Now, actually, the world has always been in trouble. Every generation can talk about how the world is going to hell now. But now it's just going to hell because of social media and the internet. But that's just a part of life. But again, I just tell people don't pay so much attention to what people are posting on social media. They're just talking and barking. So it's okay. The world will go on, despite the people out there barking at everything.
Right. No, and it's true, right? The world's always had this kind of heightened sense of it's now, we're falling off the cliff, or now things are
Hmm.
getting to a breaking point. But social media has definitely brought it to our awareness just that much more, and we're just kind of becoming conditioned, I think, to want to look at it, right? As
Mm.
if it's just kind of always buzzing in our ears because of the proximity of these technologies.
So when I started
Yeah,
my
please.
work at the Cato Institute in 1998, at that time, if somebody wanted to reach out to me, they'd have to send me a letter, okay, or they could call. But internet had not really been developed by that point. Then um, later on, the internet started to develop, and there were like these news discussion rooms and chat groups and all that. But still, people couldn't really reach you easily. Now they can just look you up and just send you a direct message full of anger, or they can set up a blog and criticize you. They can set up a podcast and criticize you. So now I think the difference is that it's just much easier to reach people compared to the past. As I said, in 1998, and I would receive letters from people who were angry at something I had written. Now, when they left their phone number, I will call them. And almost every time they apologize. Oh, I was having a bad day when I messaged you. But it was like a kind of a different generation. Now people would take public stands, and they criticize you, defame you, lie about you. They get clicks in doing it. They get followers in doing it. I mean, if you set up a podcast, if you have the choice between like a positive podcast and a negative podcast, go negative because you're going to have many more followers. Actually, there's a story, and again, I don't know if it's true, but a Russian newspaper supposedly just published good news for a couple of days, and they lost like half of their followers, half of their readers, like overnight. So, yeah, negative things attract people. I mean, just think about in your life. If someone compliments you, okay, that's good. If someone criticizes you, what did they say? I mean,
Right.
we
Yeah, it
just
sticks with
naturally
you.
focus much more on that kind of thing.
Oh man, well, my podcast is not going to do as well as it could because it definitely
Exactly.
is in the camp of positive. But you know
Exactly.
what? I don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
At the
Yeah, but
same time, there's certain
right.
things beyond just the follower counts that are important. But I think learning about all of this, it's just very clear that you know. Well, actually, hold on. One thing I wanted to mention is like, can you
Okay.
imagine like right now, even in like the digital era, can you imagine a critic sent you a handwritten note and sent it to you by mail? Like now you probably would be like, you get the warm fuzzies and be like, wow, they took the time to actually take out a pen and paper. Like that would be
Right.
so different. And
Exactly.
then you have a phone
Right.
call and you're like, wow, they actually picked up their phone rather than just doing all that other stuff that's even more indirect. And again,
Right.
just really trying to just be as invasive as possible to our
Mhm.
our privacy, because now our lives have just become like we've created our own avatars within the digital space, and that's
Mm,
really kind of what it seems like the future is, for better or worse. But
mm,
you know again, like I think what I was going to mention earlier was that with all of this talk about using one's voice, taking action, but
mhm,
all of the noise that comes about from taking an action and believing in the work that you're doing, it just sounds like that's just a normal part of what democracy is, right? I mean, you're
mhm.
doing your thing, people are doing their things, and then there's going to be a bunch of people that might not agree with it, but there'll also be people that do agree with what you're doing.
Right.
And yet it's here you are just trying to kind of continue doing the work, right? You pay attention, but you continue doing the work, and you get results. And it
Mhm,
sounds that like from the work that you've been doing with North Korean refugees, the results are evident in the numbers of the hundreds and hundreds of North Korean refugees that have successfully learned English, integrated into society, and even made global impact through their books, right? That they're publishing. And I just think that that's so amazing. And so
mm,
my question is like, beyond just your own self as an individual who is making this change by like following in your pursuits and taking action, um,
mm,
like what is it like supporting these North Korean refugees as they're
mm.
discovering their voice, and then I think more so harnessing that voice through the power of language, and like how does that connect to global citizenship?
Okay, well, great question. Okay, so first of all, as I mentioned, when I was at Cato Institute, I would get angry letters. When I had a radio talk show, when I would open the lines, typically be like, "Oh, you're a sellout," or you know what, they should kick you off the air. So just negative stuff usually. Of course, there's some positive callers, but a lot of it was negative. Um, then I started working with North Korean refugees. Oh my goodness. So I wrote a book with the North Korean refugee, as I mentioned, Songmi Han. She calls me her hero, her life mentor, says that I changed her life. She was on the verge of committing suicide and was in deep depression when she found me. And now she's as happy as can be. She's an author and public speaker. So I've seen, where she started when I first met her and where she is now. There's a refugee named Yummy Park who calls me an angel, says that I believed in her before she believed in herself. Other North Korean refugees, actually, a lot of them call me Kominam, like Pretty Flower Man. So yeah, it's I'm not so pretty now, but maybe a
Well,
decade ago when I first met them. But
well,
I
it's
get
it's the
so much.
radiance, the
Yeah,
radiance of your
exactly.
energy.
I get so much praise from North Korean refugees, and then our volunteers and donors. Actually, our board of directors, I mean, they're all South Koreans, and they just praise me so much and about the difference I'm making. So if there's an occasional critic, it's okay because I get so much love from the people around me. I mean, especially the North Korean refugees, but also South Korean, some Americans, some other people from other countries. So, yeah. So then, I mean, it's just been a beautiful experience. I've been doing this since 2012. The organization formed in 2013. And I've seen so many success stories, refugees, basically starting with no English to later on giving like a TEDx talk. Um, um, of our four authors, three of them say that they all, had like some trauma related to growing up in North Korea, but that publishing a book was like a healing experience for them. So yeah. So anyway, it's just this. Yeah, it's just. Oh my goodness! I wish they were here so they could talk. I mean, I feel strange like bragging about the love that I get from them. But yeah, it's there all the time. Almost at least once a week, one of them will contact me or contact my co-founder Ungu Lee and just praise us for the work that we're doing.
It's I think it's it's important, especially considering how much we talked about negative criticisms and how that
Hmm.
is pervasive. I think the contrast to that, the other side, what you're sharing right now, is very important, right? That there are so many positive voices out there, and those voices are aligned in the same actions that you're doing, because
Hmm.
it is very much a team effort, but it's one in which I think there's this deep empowerment that is happening, where you're able to share in not only like your knowledge and like the skills that you're able to offer to them, but to really help them integrate into kind of like a network of professionals, of storytellers, of individuals who can really show them another world. And then once they see that, then they're off to the races, right? And then
Mm.
they're doing things that are probably then inspiring you, right? So then it's this kind of positive feedback loop where at first they were just like, wow, it's you, and then now you're it's mutual, right? It's in the same way that a dialogue goes, where it's kind of
Hmm.
two-way street. And I think
Yeah.
it in a way you can even just sum it up to friendship, right? Because that's that sense of like respect and pride and inspiration that you've been able to like cultivate these friendships over a number of years. And I think that ties into global citizenship as well, right?
Mm.
Because they're definitely not strangers now, right? That you've
Right.
been engaged with them. But I think that making impact and following in those same footsteps of I'm going to take this action and I'm going to keep taking this action, even when not everyone, but like these critics are saying a bunch of stuff.
Hmm.
It's all good. You're just going to continue doing the work because it's
Yeah,
that
exactly.
meaningful,
Yeah,
like a
just keep
purpose in
doing the
life.
work. As the radio talk show host used to ask, "What are you going to do about it?" Well, I'm doing something about it. And
You are.
yeah, and actually, so I mentioned my co-author a
Uh,
couple of times. In her case, when she was in North Korea, she knew about 5 or 6 countries in the whole world. Okay. That's how isolated she was when she was there. So she was definitely not a global citizen. Now, living in freedom, because of our work, she's now traveled to 5 different countries, and she traveled separately on her own when she was, shortly after she arrived and went to Canada. So now she's lived and traveled to 6 different countries, the same number that she knew about when she was in North Korea. Okay. We've had some others who, again, when they were in North Korea, I mean, global citizen, no way. They didn't know anything about the world. But we've now taken North Korean refugees to, I think it's 13 different countries, and in some cases more than once to some countries. So they're learning about the world. They're experiencing the world. Because of our work, so many people contact them. And sometimes they learn about countries in the world because somebody from that country contacted them or they traveled there with us. So they're learning about the world, taking advantage of opportunities that are out there. So they've changed in so many ways because of the work of our organization.
Yeah. And it sounds like this beautiful expansion of their work in tandem with their own capabilities and their own
Hmm.
confidence that they can not only learn about that wider world, but through sharing their stories, they're able to influence it for the
Mm.
better, right?
Hmm.
And I think again, this is kind of a nice place I think for us to kind of close out this
Okay.
conversation, but it's the work, it's the question right from the radio host that's like, what are you going to do about this? Well,
Hmm.
you're gonna continue doing the work. You're gonna continue
Hmm.
showing up, even when things seemingly are very difficult or dark. But how to bring all of that and to create value through those conversations, those discussions, those that the hate mail, all of
Hmm.
that. I think it really serves your own benefit of continuing in your impact. So I just think that's really wonderful. And I wanted to ask a final question. This
Hmm.
is a question I ask all my guests. And so, do you have any book or movie recommendations?
uh, Actually, there's only one book, and it's the one that I wrote.
Okay,
Yes, so it's Greenlight to Freedom. And I mentioned a bit
please.
earlier, I wrote it with a North Korean refugee named Songmi Han. And it tells the story of her, first of all, just terrible life in North Korea on the virtue of starvation, living in a barn, homeless for a while, but with her mom. And then her mom escaped when right before her 12th birthday. And then she spent about 6 years living with her aunt and basically just terrible, terrible situation, even living above a pig. So, but then her mom rescued her. And it's a story about her escape, which was also really dramatic. She was getting shot at as she ran across the border. And then about her adjustment, but also some struggles when she came to South Korea. And then actually one thing is that because I learned about her struggles, I took her to a Harvard alumni event. And she was just like, when she was in North Korea, she only went to elementary school for 1 year. But then here she was at a Harvard alumni event, and she just couldn't believe it. She called her mom. It's like a great moment in her life. But anyway, the one book that I'd recommend is Green Light, one word, Green Light to Freedom by Songmi Han and Casey Lartigue.